Welcome back, everybody, to the People Talking from a Social Distance podcast. I have another great guest with me today. This is someone who holds a very unique distinction, being one of the few people who beat me in our recent Gator Golf tournament. A person who I think takes the idea of a lifelong learner and an impassioned educator to the extreme in all the right ways. And it's everybody's favorite tech coach, Sydney Zuhn.
Well, thanks for having me today, Greg. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here as well. It's been fun to do this, to talk with some different people and try to get some different perspectives. I mean, while we're all away from the building, we all have to remember that we're part of a community. So I appreciate you talking from a social distance with me. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about teaching, a little bit about things outside of teaching, and just sort of have a nice conversation and remind ourselves about the community that we're all part of. So the one I like to start with for our questions is if you had to pick another word or another label outside of the idea of like being a teacher, what would that other word or label be and why?
So I actually have two, and my first would be an advocate. And the reason that I choose advocate is because in addition to teaching full-time, I also am a director at a nonprofit, and that nonprofit is focused on safety education. And so there are different programs we have for younger children and adolescents, and we have some programs for adults as well. But it's really the idea is that people will learn how to, be safe in any environment and be able to advocate for themselves in any environment. But the biggest program that we work with is for children that are kindergarten through first grade, and there's a week-long safety camp where they go through all different types of safety, like personal safety and vehicle safety and fire safety and environment safety. But again, the idea is that, even as 5-year-olds, if they are put in, uncomfortable situations, that they should be able to advocate for themselves and stay safe. The other word that I would use to describe myself is a researcher. I, when it comes to just doing anything, like buying anything or needing to complete anything, I will always turn to research. So even if I just need to buy like anything off of like Amazon, I will go deep into the rabbit hole of reviews and then look up like what studies might have been done on that. Like I am a researcher, unfortunately, to the extreme. So it might, like some people might just be like, oh, I need a new carpet. And some people can be like, oh, this is what I want. Nope, it's going to take me a long time because I need to research like what's the best option and what is going to be most eco-friendly. I'm very high maintenance is what we're going to go with on that one. Well,
and I mean, a science teacher who is very concerned with safety and data. That just seems to be right to character, right? Like
you would think, or just weird.
I've heard a lot of people, and it's interesting because I think both those things tie into this idea that I'm hearing from a lot of people with that question, and that's even when we pick words outside of teacher, it's things that relate back to why we are teachers, right? Like it's always connecting us back to this profession, and I think I always wonder if that's the same case in other professions where like the idea of what the profession is so tied to the identity of the people who are part of it.
Yeah, the core of who you are, regardless of like what profession you choose, those core attributes are there regardless. That's a good point. That'd be interesting to find out.
We could do some research, right? Boom.
I absolutely could.
So I think you kind of touched on some of these things, but another question I like to ask and have some conversation on is outside of teaching, which I think we both agree is very integral to our identities. What are some other things though that you like to do, that you're passionate about, that you really like use your time to reflect and do things outside of teaching?
So one thing I really like to do is I really like to bake, and it's something that I really haven't had much time to do until COVID hit. And it's something that as I was growing up, I used to do all the time with my grandmother. And it's just, I learned all different types of techniques from her. And I've just noticed that over the last 8 months now, I've had an opportunity to bake and have people kind of some people safely try some of my concoctions, and it's been really nice because I think who I am is I'm somebody who likes to give gifts and you know, just kind of share my knowledge with people. So it's been nice to kind of go back to something I did when I was a kid and just try new things. But again, it's that same thing. Before I make a recipe, I have to look at all these different options. And one thing I found that I really like to do is look at old recipes, like where they came from. And it's always interesting to look at like what ingredients they use. And first of all, almost always they're things you already have. You don't have to go out and buy some weird, like, you know, ingredient that you've never heard of. It's usually stuff you have in your kitchen. And just, I like to think about how in the past, how did they come up with like these things would go together? Or like, is it just stuff you had in your kitchen and you threw together and it happened to work? Or is it stuff you really thought through and came to this recipe evolved? So
yeah, both of my my parents, my father's side, Italian immigrants, my mother's side, her family came over a little bit before then, but like Great Depression era. So like Great Depression style cooking, you're right, where you're just like, they didn't know that Crisco and a little bit of flour and like they didn't know that was gonna work.
They didn't
like,
know that. No, not at all. Yeah, my grandparents on my dad's side, their parents came over from Italy as well. But my other side is more Polish based, so kind of a interesting combo.
So when you bake, do you have a specific thing that you like to bake? Do you have a speciality? Is there something that you're like, this is my thing?
No, I tend to like cakes and like cookies more, but I don't like decorating cakes. I just cannot get into that. I just want like simple frosting. I'm not going to be, I just want it to like taste good. I'd like it to look okay, but I don't need it to like be, some of the people who do like the fondant and all this other stuff, I don't care for that personally. I just want it to like look decent and taste good. But I would probably say like cakes and cookies are probably my thing.
Nice. Yeah, I'm not a fondant guy either. Give me that buttercream, put it on there thick, and then just you're done with it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you said cookies, and I think I'm a persnickety cookie maker myself. Is there a specific cookie that's your cookie? Because I'm a snickety master. So.
I have a good peanut butter cookie that I absolutely love, or just favorite chocolate chip cookies is usually my go-to.
Yeah, so many people can't make a good chocolate chip cookie. It's crazy, right? Like
No. The key is brown butter. You gotta melt that butter and make sure it's brown.
That is a great tip. The next thing we like to talk about is just sort of getting to know some of our colleagues a little bit more. And it's always interesting how people answer this question. But I always ask, what's something that if you told us we would have a hard time believing, or what's something that when you do tell someone, they're like, there's no way.
That would be the one that I didn't prepare for. I messed up. I guess one thing for me is that I lived in Spain for a while, and I actually to this day regret that I am not still living in Spain. That I fell in love with the Spanish culture and the language and just the way of life. That if I could redo my life, I would spend an entire year instead of a semester in Spain in college, or I would have moved to Spain. That would be. I always thought I would learn Italian and go to Italy, but I fell in love with Spanish and the Spanish culture. And if I could be living in Granada right now.
Right on. Yeah, that's it. That's good. I mean, I would have never guessed that, right? You seem so wholesomely Midwestern, right? Like.
Yes.
I had the same thing kind of happen with my father wanted to go back to Italy, and he's like, we're gonna go, and yeah. I was like, well, that's cool. I was like, can we spend some time in England? He's like, why do you want to go to England? I'm like, Beowulf, Shakespeare.
Yeah. Oh yeah, London, all that good stuff.
Where you fall in love with in Europe is just where it's gonna be, right?
Always, the rest of your life, man.
So, yeah, man. Oof. The next thing we like to ask about is a desert island pick or some sort of recommendation, right? So the desert island idea, you're stuck on a desert island, what would you bring with you? But just in general, is there a specific book or an album or a movie or a game that you'd like you always want to recommend to people?
So this is a totally dorktastic recommendation, but one of my like all-time favorite movies is Return to Me. And it is, like I said, it's absolutely dorktastic. But what I love most about that movie, it's you know, like a dorky romantic comedy, but what I love most is there's a group of like four older gentlemen that just like, you know, like rag on each other and have like the best jokes. And I absolutely love movies when there are, you know, just like elderly figures that are just hysterical. And I love that Bonnie Hunt wrote and produced and directed it. So like, you know, got to represent the women out there that are successful. And she's from Chicago. So I just think that that's cool. And her movies are just kind of fun and wholesome and cute. So that would probably be my, you know, like all-time favorite, but it is a dorky one, so I totally acknowledge that.
Nothing wrong with that. I'm sitting in front of Obama with a Mike Tyson face tattoo and Bruce Lee with lightsabers.
But it's Obama. He can't do anything wrong.
I'm just saying, there's nothing too nerdy or dorky for me.
Cheesy, yeah. I'm with you.
When you said the elderly characters acting ridiculous, I went straight to Coming to America, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one.
I mean, if we're talking about old men and older people just being complete jerks to each other.
Right. It's magical. Like no matter what, it's comedy gold.
All right. The last thing we like to ask about, and we do bring it back to teaching. And again, I want to just thank you for your time. It's been a great chat. Getting to have some time to again speak and just remind ourselves of the community we're part of, and to swap baking recipes and stuff. Which I mean. But this is an open avenue now, right? Like you want bread.
Right.
Recipes.
Yeah. No, we definitely have to keep sharing recipes and good stuff.
I always ask if someone would like to share either their funniest or their worst or a moment of hindsight in their teaching where it's like that had an effect at me then, but now I feel very differently about it.
So I think my worst moment in teaching was probably my first year teaching that I taught on the south side of Chicago, and I was teaching in a STEM lab, and there was a new girl who had only been in class for a couple of weeks, and she was just not really, it ended up being she really wasn't comfortable, but there was already a beef between her and some of the other girls in school. And so she happened to bring a knife in her purse because she wanted to start a fight with another girl. And she chose my class to start that fight in at the same time. She was very strategic about when she wanted to start the fight, and it was just at the end of class. So I had, and because it was South Chicago, we happened to have larger class sizes. So I had about 33 students in my class. And the way that the class was set up, it was a really long classroom with all these different computers and kind of like walls set up, and you couldn't see all the students at the same time. And then on top of that, I happened to have a girl who started puking, like projectile vomit puking, and the bell rang. So I had a girl who was pulling a knife out of her purse, another person who was projectile vomiting, and students were trying to come in and leave at the same time. So that was like one of those perfect like moments of teaching where you realize you kind of need to become a filter or like a colander in terms of like, what is the most important thing that I need to deal with right now? Because do I deal with the girl who's about to get stabbed, or do I deal with the projectile vomit and, you know, the computers, by the way, that are about to be like absolutely destroyed? And I'm also somebody who, when I hear or see vomit, I start vomiting. So there was that level of just like, oh my gosh. So I don't even know what happened, but I was able to shoot the students who were trying to come into another classroom. I had to kind of have everybody wait. Like I had to call the principal, and yeah, I mean, it all worked out. Nobody was hurt. Like my senses were assaulted from the smell of the vomit, but other than that, we made it through. And obviously I'm still teaching, but I think about that day every now and then, and you know, like nothing has been that bad. You know, there have been other things that have happened, but I have not had to deal with that trifecta of magic at any given time since teaching. So,
wow.
that would probably be my worst teaching moment.
That's a That's a great answer for that question.
You're welcome.
That's great, right? Like, yeah, no matter, as long as things don't get that bad again, right? You can keep moving forward. That's a
right. You absolutely can. So if I can overcome that, like, you know, I don't want to say bring it on, because I do not want to challenge the world, because, you know, it can get worse. But if I was able to get through that, I kind of feel like you can kind of handle anything at that time.
Well, I want to thank you again for your time. This has been awesome, Sydney. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for talking to us from a social distance.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me. This was awesome.